What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to Bird Dog Gaming. Today it's time for another episode of a series I host on this channel called Complete the Set, where I give you all the information you need to collect every video game from a specific series. And while I typically just dive into one franchise per episode, these two iconic franchises are way too closely related to have their own episodes. Who am I talking about? Crash Bandicoot and Spyro the Dragon. Crash was once the renowned mascot of Sony. He even went up to the Nintendo building and talked a bunch of trash about Mario through a megaphone. True story. Another big plus to owning a PlayStation in the late 90s was having access to the Spyro games. Since then, however, both franchises have found themselves on consoles produced by the very companies they originally set out to defeat. Today we're diving into all of it, from PS1 to Nintendo Switch. Spyro and Crash were a requested topic from my Rayman episode of Complete the Set, so thanks to user Kaiser Allen for the recommendation, and make sure you guys drop a comment to let me know what other series you want me to cover in this style. With all of that out of the way, let's get into it. First up, as always, are the standard releases. These are the first print, first possible versions of the games that you could have gotten at release, and we'll be starting with Crash Bandicoot. Starting in 1996 on the original PlayStation, we have Crash Bandicoot, Crash Bandicoot 2, Cortex Strikes Back, and Crash Bandicoot Warped, quickly followed by Crash Team Racing and Crash Bash. The Crash Bandicoot Collector's Edition came with Crash Bandicoot Warped, Crash Team Racing, and Crash Bash, all with white labels. On the PS2, you had Crash Bandicoot, The Wrath of Cortex, Crash Nitro Kart, Tag Team Racing, Twin Sanity, and Crash of the Titans, and there was also a Crash Bandicoot Action Pack. And it's important to note that these will say part of a set on the back, where the barcode usually is. Oh, and I almost forgot about Crash Mind Over Mutant on the PS2. The Xbox also had Crash Bandicoot The Wrath of Cortex, as well as Nitro Kart, Tag Team Racing, and Twin Sanity, but it didn't have the Action Pack. Instead, it got the Super Pack. The GameCube also had The Wrath of Cortex, Nitro Kart, and Tag Team Racing. Over on the Game Boy Advance, we had the Crash of the Titans, Nitro Kart, The Huge Adventure, Crash Bandicoot 2 Entranced, Crash Bandicoot Purple Ripto's Rage, and the Crash Super Pack. Moving on to the Wii, we only had Crash of the Titans and Crash Mind Over Mutant. The Xbox 360 had the same two games, and the Nintendo DS also had those two games, but with a DS exclusive called Crash Boom Bang. The PSP got Crash of the Titans, Tag Team Racing, and Mind Over Mutant. And then the latest consoles all have the same games. It's the Crash 4 It's About Time, Crash Team Racing Nitro Fueled, and Crash Bandicoot The Insane Trilogy. But that's not all. We also have the Nokia N-Gage, which had more Crash games than the PlayStation 3. That's right, Crash Nitro Kart was available on the Nokia N-Gage. And the last standard release is kind of debatable. This is a Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy physical cardboard box that was released for PC, but it only had a download code inside, so count that as you will. Now let's move on to the Purple Dragon. Starting in 1998 with the PS1, there was Spyro the Dragon, Spyro 2 Ripto's Rage, and Year of the Dragon. And then there was a Spyro Collector's Edition, a nice white label to add to your shelf. On the PS2, we had Spyro Enter the Dragonfly, Spyro A Hero's Tale, and then there was the Legend of Spyro trilogy, starting with A New Beginning, followed by The Eternal Night, and finishing with Dawn of the Dragon. Dawn of the Dragon would cross-release onto the PS3, and the PS3 also had Skylanders Spyro's Adventure. The original Xbox and GameCube both had Spyro A Hero's Tale and The Legend of Spyro A New Beginning, but the GameCube also got Enter the Dragonfly, which the Xbox did not get. The Xbox 360 got to see The Legend of Spyro Dawn of the Dragon, as well as Skylanders Spyro's Adventure. The Game Boy Advance had a huge lineup of Spyro games, starting with Season of Ice, Season of Flame, Attack of the Rhinox, Spyro Orange The Cortex Conspiracy, Spyro Super Pack, The Legend of Spyro A New Beginning, and The Legend of Spyro The Eternal Night. The Wii had The Legend of Spyro The Eternal Night, as well as Dawn of the Dragon, and it also got Skylanders Spyro's Adventure. And the Nintendo DS got Spyro Shadow Legacy, as well as the trilogy of The Legend of Spyro games. The Nintendo 3DS saw only Skylanders Spyro's Adventure, And then when you get to the modern consoles, they all have Spyro the Reignited Trilogy. Games that contained both Crash and Spyro include Crash and Spyro the Super Pack for the Game Boy Advance. It had Crash Bandicoot Purple as well as Spyro Orange. And then there was the Spyro and Crash Game Bundle, which released on both Xbox One and PS4. Quick editor's note here. There are actually 2 Crash and Spyro Super Packs on the Game Boy Advance. I almost forgot one, but the other one has Season of Ice and The Huge Adventure on it. I'm combining the features, foreign exclusives, and demos into one section for this video because there just aren't enough of each for me to make a title card out of each one. Let's start with the features. Features of Crash Bandicoot and Spyro run pretty rampant in media, and I'm going to try to keep it to video games that you can pick up and collect rather than TV shows and movies that feature the games. Although I suppose you could collect the DVD of the episode of Friends where Joey plays Crash Team Racing, but please don't do that, that's crazy. Spyro makes a cameo in Crash Twin Sanity. Spyro is a playable character in the GBA version of Crash Nitro Kart. In Crash Team Racing Nitro Fueled, Spyro, Hunter, and Nasty Nork are playable characters after a post-launch game update. In Asterix and Obelix XXL 2 Mission Las Vegas, there's a bust of Crash Bandicoot in the level Little Venetia. Spyro also appears in the game wearing a gladiator helmet. You can find Crash Bandicoot inside of The Legend of Spyro the Eternal Night, as well as in A New Beginning. In the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2 combo that just released on PS4 and Xbox One, there are several references and Easter eggs to the Crash Bandicoot series. In Uncharted 4, Nathan Drake can be found playing a level from the first Crash game, which is pretty neat. And finally, Crash and Cortex are playable characters in Skylanders Imaginators. Now let's talk about demos. I don't know if you guys know this, but Crash and Spyro were huge on PS1. And what else was huge back then? PlayStation Magazine. And there was a new demo disc included every single month. Can you guess how many of them included Crash or Spyro, or both? There are so many, and for that reason, I'm not going to bore you with all of that. However, for those interested, I will tell you to go check out game-rave.com. That man knows more than Sony themselves about the original PlayStation, and if there's a PlayStation demo disc that featured either of these characters, you'll be sure to find it there. I will, however, mention a few interesting ones that weren't included with PlayStation Magazine. For instance, there's a limited edition E3 2004 demo disc that includes Spyro A Hero's Tale and Crash Twin Sanity on one disc in this super cool cardboard sleeve. There's also a Crash Nitro Kart demo disc for the PS2, pretty basic, and just as basic is this one for Wrath of Cortex. Here's a PS1 demo disc with Ripto's Rage and Crash Team Racing, but the coolest one that I would really recommend you pick up is the Crash Bash and Year of the Dragon pop-up demo disc. I mean, look at this. That is art. I couldn't really find any out there for GameCube or Xbox. There are a ton of PlayStation kiosk discs that you can find that obviously showed off Crash and Spyro 2. Once again, find those at GameRave.com. And finally, there is just one foreign exclusive out of these two series combined. Do you know what it is? I bet you're not even expecting it. Of course, by foreign, I mean it was never released here in North America. Alright, you ready? Not only is this a Wii U exclusive, but this game is also Japanese exclusive. Skylanders, Spyro's Freaking Adventure. I know, listen. As a Rayman collector, I've chosen to exclude any Rabbids games that don't have Rayman in the title because I just want nothing to do with them. You can totally do the same with Skylanders if you want. No one's gonna judge you for not having this on your shelf. I mean, who has room for that? This is always my favorite section. Variants are typically a slightly different version of the first release of the game, but with a change to the front of the box or a glitch being removed from the code. Now, do you need these to complete the set? Not necessarily. That's something that you can define for yourself because you're the only one who gets to choose how you collect. But whatever you decide, let's get into them because there's a lot. So let's just go ahead and get it out of the way. Every Crash game that released on the PlayStation had a greatest hits release, so go ahead and write those down if you're interested. Now, there was a Crash Bandicoot Universal Interactive Studios second printing where the Studios word was actually missing from the first print. So that's an easy way to tell which one is the first print if you're looking on eBay. Crash Bandicoot had a collector's edition with 3 games included, and believe it or not, the collector's edition also had a variant. For whatever reason, there is a collector's edition of this game that included a white Crash Team Racing disc as opposed to the other silver release. Pretty weird, but I live for this stuff. Crash Bandicoot Warped had a black label non-lenticular cover, so if you see a lenticular cover, that is probably the first print. And the first print of Crash Team Racing had shiny letters, so it's important to note that the Crash Team Racing that is black label and also has non-shiny letters is a variant. Over on the PS2, you had a greatest hits version of Crash Nitro Kart, as well as a greatest hits version of The Wrath of Cortex. But Crash Nitro Kart also had a bonus music CD variant, and Crash of the Titans had a French-Canadian variant. Over on the GameCube, there is a bonus music CD variant as well for Crash Nitro Kart, and The Wrath of Cortex did make it to the Player's Choice budget label. On the Xbox, The Wrath of Cortex also made it as a Platinum Hits game. And once again, Crash Nitro Kart did have a variant with a bonus music CD. One thing that you won't find on the other 2 consoles is a Crash Twinsanity free EGM magazine variant, which is pretty neat. Over on the PSP, you have a couple of interesting ones. Crash Tag Team Racing and Crash of the Titans both got this gold favorites banner, which is interesting to me because PSP also had a greatest hits budget label line, so I guess these 2 games didn't sell quite enough, but they're still favorites? I don't know. The Game Boy Advance is a lot of fun to collect for, and the variants are just awesome. Crash Bandicoot Purple Ripto's Rage had a bonus Crash and Spyro game cartridge case included. That one is pretty hard to find. There is a Crash Bandicoot Purple French-Canadian variant, as well as a Crash of the Titans Huge Adventure and Entranced French-Canadian variant. On the Nintendo DS, there were a couple of French-Canadian variants. I found Crash of the Titans and Crash Mind Over Mutant. And to finally wrap up the Crash variants, there are some pretty special big box bundles for the Switch, PS4, and Xbox One. Now, it's important to note that these all came with not for resale copies of the games inside, so don't get incorrectly married parts. Crash Bandicoot had a game and controller bundle on the Switch, which came with a Power A controller. This was not on PS4 or Xbox One. Which, by the way, this brings up another good point. While I don't necessarily have an accessories section in these videos, there are a handful of Crash and Spyro Power A controllers that came out for the Nintendo Switch, and there's even one for the Xbox One. They all look pretty great if you're interested. Moving right along, GameStop had the Crash Team Racing Nitro-Fueled Nitrous Oxide and Pin Bundle, which was a GameStop exclusive, and it was a big box, and it was released on the Switch, Xbox, and PS4. Other than that, there was a freaking sock bundle for the PS4 and Xbox One released alongside the Insane Trilogy. Crash Team Racing got a best racing game variant across all platforms, including this interesting double variant. It's a French-Canadian and it's got the little badge. Once again, the PS1 variants are super interesting for Spyro. There was the Spyro the Dragon Black Label Sweepstakes variant. Now, the first print also had a sweepstakes, but it was slightly different. According to Game Rave, the variant's disc art is less saturated and there's a second ring around the middle of the disc. I suppose if you were one of the sweepstakes winners, you could also count that as a variant, but I don't know if you're ever going to find that. Then the third print of Spyro the Dragon also had Black Label, but this time there was no sweepstakes attached to the back of the manual. Then there was the greatest hits of literally all 3 of the games on PlayStation. Spyro 2 originally released with a foil cover, which means there was a variant without the foil cover. And Year of the Dragon had a Black Label non-lenticular cover. On the PS2, there's a couple of budget label releases for Enter the Dragonfly and The Legend of Spyro: A New Beginning. This one even got a double variant. It's French-Canadian and it's greatest hits. On the GameCube, you had Player's Choice copies of Enter the Dragonfly as well as A Hero's Tale. And then there was an EGM magazine variant for Spyro: A Hero's Tale on the GameCube as well as the Xbox. It's interesting to note that the GameCube got the budget label of a Spyro game, but a PS2 version didn't. Moving on to Game Boy Advance, just like Crash Purple, there is a Spyro Orange variant that had a Crash and Spyro game cartridge case to keep your cartridge clean. Spyro Orange also had a French-Canadian variant, as well as The Legend of Spyro: A New Beginning. Spyro Season of Flame has an interesting variant that I don't think many people know or really care about. So on the Game Boy Advance, if you look at the bottom of a box, there's different types of bottom flaps that each box could come with. I like to call them the Y-fold, the regular bottom flap, and the scissor fold. Spyro Season of Flame actually has a variant with the scissor fold and one with the Y fold. I'm unsure which is the first print, but I think the scissor fold might be. Other than that, there is a Spyro Season of Ice variant on the Game Boy Advance that says All-Star Software 2002 on it, whatever the heck that means. There's also Spyro Attack of the Rhinox, a variant that came with a skin for your Game Boy Advance SP. We'll talk more on that one later, it's super cool. The Nintendo DS had a couple of French-Canadian variants. They were Dawn of the Dragon and the Eternal Night. The Wii had a few French-Canadian variants, including Skylanders, Spyro's Adventure, the Eternal Night, and Dawn of the Dragon. On the 3DS, there is a Skylanders Spyro's Adventure French-Canadian variant, and I tried, but I couldn't find a copy of Skylanders that didn't have a not for resale on the back, but I totally feel like that could exist, so if you have any care in the world for this game, keep an eye out. Over on the Xbox 360, Dawn of the Dragon did receive a French-Canadian variant, and some interesting big boxes for the Xbox One, Switch, and PS4. There is the Reignited trilogy that has the Colossum game and sock bundle. Those were on the Xbox One and PS4. And the last thing to note that I forgot to mention in the Crash section is that all of the modern games have French-Canadian variants on all platforms they released on. So Crash 4, Crash Team Racing, the Insane trilogy, and Spyro the Reignited trilogy all have French-Canadian variants on all the platforms that they released on. I've got some bad news and some good news when it comes to Holy Grails for these two series. In all honesty, I don't think there's a specific game for either series that I would consider a Holy Grail. That's the bad news. But on the other hand, the good news is that there aren't any games that you are going to have to fork over hundreds of dollars for. As a matter of fact, if you're not into sealed games, none of these games are going to cost you more than a couple $100s. In the last two episodes of this series, you had some extremely rare Mega Man games and some very uncommon Rayman variants that make completing those sets pretty challenging. But Spyro and Crash? They're totally attainable. Now, if you get yourself all of the games and variants you're into, you can always expand to plushes and action figures, some of which can be pretty rare and expensive from my understanding. If that sounds boring, the sealed and graded games market is always there to take your money. If I had to choose anything from this list today to be a Holy Grail, it would probably be Skylander. No, seriously, it would probably be one of the GBA variants, either those Crash Purple and Spyro Orange GBA releases that included dust covers for your cartridges, or the Attack of the Rhinox variant that included a skin for the SP. You never see those. They're pretty rare and they're cardboard, right? Cardboard is the stuff that rarity is made out of. So, what did you learn today? I'll be willing to bet that you didn't know about a bunch of the variants I mentioned today. I definitely enjoy making these videos because at the very least it helps me learn a bunch about variants and other collector's items that I didn't even know existed. For instance, as a GameCube collector, I knew that Crash Nitro Kart had a special soundtrack variant with a special extra CD, but I had no idea that Xbox and PS2 also had that same variant. But on the other side of things, are there any games I forgot to mention? Are there any variants that slipped my mind? Are there any other series that you would like me to cover in my Complete the Set series? If there are, please feel free to reach out to me on any of my social media at BirdDog Gaming, or just simply drop a comment to this video like Kaiser Allen did. But that's it for me, so thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you next time right here on BirdDog Gaming.